link between magic and science has always been strong, and once the mystical is proven, it can become scientific fact. It's a pursuit that has shaped the world and man's understanding of it from the time of Newton. Isaac Newton was born in the 17th century, when man still believed the cosmos revolved around the earth. He is known both as the father of modern science and the last of the great magicians.
Newton was an extraordinary intellect. He was able to concentrate for endless hours, and sometimes it seemed days on an issue. He could keep in mind all of the parts.
Newton vividly imagined his theories, and only later backed them up with experiments, a practice now known as an altered state of consciousness.
People can do this by running or exercising. People can do it by fasting. People can do it by drinking or drugging. People can do it by prayer or meditation. There are many hypnotism. There are many venerable practices over thousands of years where people have altered their state of consciousness.
Well, I think creativity really requires something like the acceptance of intuition, acceptance of inspiration as the starting point for ideas that turn out to be profound, important, and even scientific ideas. If you open yourself to the cosmos, you will be filled with new knowledge.
Fascinating. He was born on Christmas Day. He was a widow's son. He was raised in a kind of austere surroundings, and went off to college and kind of never stopped being at college, and studied the rest of his life. From a young man, he studied everything there was in the universe to study.
The Renaissance had been fueled by the rediscovery of long-lost early Greek and occult texts. Scholars like Newton were thrilled to discover new ideas in science, religion, and magic. Newton was not only a scientist, he was an avowed alchemist.
Most of the brilliant people in history, and Isaac Newton was one of them, went into alchemy, went into various occult pursuits because they wanted to find out how things work, and they were willing to go as far as they needed to satisfy their inquisitive minds.
In Newton's time, there was no hard distinction between magic, spirituality, and science. Scientists used any method to expand their knowledge. He spent years searching for the crown jewel of alchemy, the philosopher's stone. The stone was not an actual gem, but a higher level of consciousness that would enable scientific and spiritual breakthroughs. Alone in his room with his alchemical experiments, Newton would go for days without food or sleep.
People who study creativity say there are several stages. First, you have to learn a great deal, and then you have to let that incubate and kind of bubble inside you, and then it will turn into something like an inspiration. That's what the alchemists were trying to do as well, and what Newton did so successfully.
Newton took on Galileo's challenge of refuting Aristotle. When he applied his mind to Aristotle's theory of falling objects in the orbit of the planets, he made the most important discovery of physics: gravity. It was groundbreaking.
When Newton thought about gravity, he had to conceive of the idea that two bodies can attract each other at a distance. And even today we have trouble figuring out how that happens. I mean, how is it that the sun knows that Jupiter is there? Who knows?
The emerging breed of empirical scientists were very uncomfortable with the whole idea that something could affect another object without touching it, without being connected to it in some way. Then we have Newton coming in with this mathematical theory that accounts perfectly for astronomical observations, but it requires there to be a force between these two different objects, and there's nothing in between. So he was basically stuck with action at a distance, no matter how uncomfortable it made him or anybody else.
Newton was also the first to discover the properties of light, and believed that light was composed of particles.
Aristotle's worldview didn't accept the idea of atoms, of indivisible components of objects. But it's clear from, for instance, Newton's writings on light, that he had some definite ideas along those lines, that he thought of light as being a stream of tiny, rapidly moving particles of some sort, corpuscles, as he wrote.
In 1687, Newton published his masterwork, Principia, and he became an international sensation. In it, he set down his 3 laws of motion: the law of inertia, the relationship between force and motion, and his final rule: for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction.